Hello, good evening, welcome. It is Sunday, the 23rd of November 2014, and you are watching Vapor Charles TV. And we're on, and there's no echo. I remembered to silence the music, but I forgot to click something else. Anyway, tonight we've got this little feature running, which you've seen some of the lads using. If you've, this is basically a live Twitter feed, but I do get to screen it. I get to read it before it goes on the screen. If you would like to have your message displayed on the screen or ask me any questions or anything as we go along tonight, then please do so. Just tweet with the hashtag VTTV, like that one on the screen there. This is hard to do that way. So it says just below EFVIUK, who tweeted it. It says VTTV. Put that hashtag in. I will see it. Hopefully, eventually. And you can make really meaningful tweets like that. Look. Underground, overground, wombling free, the Kitson of Solihull is on VTTV. He's a poet and you don't know it. Fantastic. Thank you, Jester. I'm nowhere near Solihull, by the way. That's South Birmingham. I'm way north, nearer to Derby. So, and I'm not a womble. And, oh, here's a good one because it's a good plug. Look. You get the idea. Just tweet with hash VTTV. I'll pop it up. I won't be monitoring it constantly because that means I'd be neglecting you, my wonderful audience. But if you tweet to it, I'll try and get it up there. Now, on tonight's show, we are going to be looking at a bunch of different things. I'm going to be talking a bit later and getting a bit of VT from Dave Dawn on the subject of clones, and we could almost have colluded. Dave makes reference to a non-vaping example about clones, which is very dear to my heart. So we'll be taking a little look at the whole subject of clones, because let's face it, it's contentious. It's very, very contentious. I've got an opinion on it. Dave's got an opinion on it, and you're going to get both. We'll also be taking a look at this thing. This has been causing a bit of a lot of debate, shall we say. This is the new Aspire Atlantis tank, and it's a sub-ohm tank, which, as you can see by the fact there's juice in it, I have just shoved back in this case for the point of view of presentation tonight. I have been using it, and I shall be giving you a close look at that and telling you what I think of it. There's also this thing. Now, if you have been vaping for anything less than about, I don't know, 3 years, say, the concept of this thing, the fog, by funstore.gr, a Greek website, will baffle you totally. And I thought it might be worth, if we get a few minutes towards the end, just have a little look at this thing, because there aren't a lot of them about, as far as I know. And I think it might just be interesting to take a little look. I've also got some little news stories and stuff. In fact, I'm going to throw one of those up now, if I can get the right shot here. Did you know that vape has been named the Oxford Dictionary's Word of the Year. I kid you not. Look at this. I'm not making it up. It says vape is named Oxford Dictionary's Word of the Year 2014. And I just thought it was just an interesting little aside. Vape, a verb. To inhale and exhale the vapour produced by an electronic cigarette or similar device. Vape, the noun, an electronic cigarette or similar device, an act of inhaling and exhaling the vapour produced by an electronic cigarette or similar device. So they seem to have encompassed just about every use that you can think of, really, haven't they? So a lot of people they refer to my vape. This is my vape. I need a new vape. I lost my vape. I hate my vape. Nah, that's an e-cig, okay? You won't change me on that one. But it is nice to see the word getting the recognition. And it goes on there. This is a blog at oxforddictionaries.com. You'll find it if you search for it. And it goes on to talk about how they determine this. And it's basically, it says the word of the year is a word or expression that has attracted a great deal of interest during the year to date. Language research conducted by Oxford Dictionary's editors reveals that the use of the word vape in 2014 has more than doubled compared to 2013. And let's be honest, that's not a shock, is it? That's not a shock. We know that everything's a bit more common, a bit more mainstream than it was. It says over the last 5 years of electronic cigarettes have grown from almost nothing to a multi-million-dollar industry, and the habit has gone mainstream. Interesting that the Oxford Dictionary's website should refer to multi-million dollars, isn't it, rather than pounds? But hey, whatever. And the habit has gone mainstream, where in the early days the use was primarily driven by smokers choosing a more healthy alternative to traditional cigarettes. More recently, the industry has gained its own momentum and a new audience. A gap emerged in the lexicon as a word was needed to describe this activity and distinguish it from smoking. The word vape arose to fill this gap, and it has proliferated along with the habit. One thing that did interest me, the earliest known usage of vape. Now, bear with me on this, right? It says e-cigarettes were not commercially available until the 21st century, having been invented in China in 2003. Yet the word vape actually dates to the early 1980s. Its earliest known use is in an article, Why Do People Smoke?, in the New Society magazine in 1983. The author, Rob Stepney, described a hypothetical device being explored at the time, an inhaler or non-combustible cigarette, looking much like the real thing, but delivering a metered dose of nicotine vapour. The new habit, if it catches on, will be known as vaping. He was quite a forward-thinking guy, wasn't he? Not sure about the metered dose bit, but, he wasn't that far off the mark, was he? And I've got another tweet. Let's get this tweet up. I've got to learn how to use this tweet thing properly. But, yes, it is, I believe. I've just covered it up with your tweet. But it is, I believe, an excellent T-shirt. Thank you for that. Right. So, yeah, I just wanted to share that with you. The vape is the word of the year, 2014. There were some other words down there as well. Some of them which were quite amusing, like bud tender. I'll show you that because you might as well. Bud tender. A person whose job it is to serve customers in a cannabis dispensary or shop. There you go. There's plenty. I'll throw that link somewhere after the show so you can have a butcher's if you want. But there you go. Right. I think. Let's just check the time there. I think what I might do actually is cut straight into a couple of other stories that I stumbled across as I've been looking around over the last couple of days that will amuse. Don't go away. I'll be back in about 12 seconds. And I'm back. Sorry, I didn't go far. I was just sorting something out on the other screen. Now, right, here's a story from every vapor's favourite news medium, the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail. This one, This is dated yesterday. This appeared. This graced us with its presence, and it's a story basically about it's. Well, I'll read it. I'll read it. It says MPs are left fuming. Clever. You see what they did there? You see what they did? By crazy, in inverted commas, bid to ban e-cigarettes from the House of Commons, saying it would lead to a total ban at Westminster. It says Speaker John Burkoff has been advised to ban e-cigarettes from the Commons. The plan is aimed at stopping those on tour groups from vaping in chamber. One MP said it would lead to a total ban at Westminster, including offices. Many MPs were outraged, calling it a perverse result of the nanny state. I like that. See? I know it's the Daily Mail and therefore it's probably not true, but I like reading that kind of stuff. MPs using expressions like, if you ban vaping, it would be like a perverse result of a nanny state. Gotta like that, ain't you? Right, okay, let's carry on down here. It says, plans to ban e-cigarettes from the House of Commons have been attacked by MPs. The Speaker, John Bercow, has been advised to outlaw the devices to bring the rules into line with the total no-smoking ban across Westminster. The move, approved by one Commons committee, is aimed at stopping those on tour groups from puffing on an e-cigarette or vaping as they walk through the Commons chamber. It says, but one MP said that it would likely lead to a total ban at Westminster, including MPs' offices. I got that all wrong, didn't I? It says, last night, both Labour... That's my suspicious face. Labour and Tory MPs voiced outrage at the move. Labour's Kevin Barron, former chairman of the Commons Health Committee, said, we have to be very careful when people are coming off cigarettes and onto e-cigarettes that we encourage them. It's better for their health. One has to say that when Kevin Barron next bumps into some of his Labour colleagues, he's probably in for a bit of a kicking if he really said that, isn't he? Because the guy's talking sense, and, that is not Labour policy, is it? So I'm starting to like this guy at this stage. But an MP on the Commons Administration Committee, which approved the draft ban plan, said it'll apply to the chamber and to the main areas seen by visitors and tourists when they come in. I can't see a problem with that. I can see a problem with that. Because it is, even your own colleagues are talking about the thin end of the wedge, innit? You ban that, and then the next thing they won't be able to vape in their offices or anything. And if they're showing outrage at this, one assumes that some of these MPs are vaping in their offices in the House of Commons. Good for them. It says Tory MP Philip Davies, who has never smoked, said, this is crazy. Are the House authorities going to force them to congregate with all the smokers in those shelters? How will that help their health? This is a perverse consequence of the nanny state. But an MP on the Commons Administration Committee, which approved the draft ban plan, said it'll apply to the chamber and the main areas seen by visitors and tourists when they come in. I can't see a problem with that. And then a Commons spokesman, which is a bit of a giveaway, innit, if you don't credit your source, said a final decision had yet to be made. So in the grand scheme of things, this doesn't mean a lot, does it? But when was the last time you heard Labour MPs go on record saying that any sort of attempt to bring in a vaping ban anywhere is a perverse result of the nanny state? I'm liking that. That means maybe there is some point in pushing some of these buggers for a bit more support. Right. Glad I got that off my chest. I don't know what you thought of that. I'm getting tweets on the subject of clones, which I haven't even spoken about yet, so that's good. If you've got any comment on that MP ban thing, let me know. I've got another news piece that I just want to look at very quickly before we take our first break. And this follows on from last week. Last week, we spoke about a BBC article about house fires being caused by e-cigs, as the headline reported it, but in truth, we had a bit of video there, including some senior fire officer type who was saying that actually it's got altered down, with cheap chargers. Don't buy cheap ones off the market, buy good quality ones. And that was the discussion we had ourselves. And also, make sure that you use the charger that comes with your e-cig kit. Don't start mixing and matching unless you don't know unless you're absolutely sure what you're doing. So, in other words, if you don't. Just common sense. Interestingly, we did that at that story between 9 and 10 last week on VTTV. And as I was travelling to work on Monday morning, I was browsing and I saw this. And I know this has been mentioned before on VTTV, but I thought it was a nice little round off to what we spoke about last week. This is an article on gov.uk, so it's an official government release. And the heading is a little bit dodgy. It's talking about acts to improve e-cigarette safety. It's not really improving e-cigarette safety at all. It's just giving some sound advice on charging. And I won't read it out because I know that it was looked at earlier on this channel earlier in the week. But it basically just details some sensible advice on charging lithium-ion batteries. Things like follow the instructions provided by the manufacturer, take notice of warnings supplied with the product, ensure that e-cigarettes are not left charging for long periods of time, or like overnight and when you're out of the house, look for the CE mark that indicates chargers comply with the European safety standards, don't overload plug socket, the usual sort of stuff. Avoid buying counterfeit or substandard goods. It's kind of like very sensible advice, and I have to say, on balance, I think it read well. I think there could have been an opportunity there by government if they'd chosen to actually sort of heap a bit more misery and woes onto the subject of e-cigs. I always get fearful when I hear government's going to give advice on e-cigs that they're going to just advise it. Oh, no, use patches or Champix or gum or something like that, and don't touch them. But they haven't. They've actually given sort of guidelines for the safe continued use of e-cigs, and you've got to recognise that. I think it's a very valid point, and I think it was Dave Dawn that actually raised this point when we were talking about it on Twitter earlier in the week. And he was saying that it's a little bit irritating because this is generic advice for charging lithium-ion batteries, and by if that maybe the title on this, I'll just put it back up on screen, but maybe the title on this is a government acts to improve battery safety. Yeah, maybe that would have been more appropriate, and I have to agree with him. It's not a problem, as we were saying last week, as the lads were saying earlier in this week as well. It's not a problem with e-cigarettes on their own. It's not. It's a generic problem, a concern when you're using high capacity lithium-ion batteries. Then there are some do's and don'ts, and they've listed those quite well. On balance, I think it's good advice. If I'd have written it, I perhaps would have made the point that this applies to your iPhone. Apple. Let's face it, Apple have got a pretty good record for customer service and safety and all the rest of it. But do you remember all those counterfeit chargers that were going around about a year ago? It got to the point where they were actually starting to cause so much concern that Apple replaced the counterfeit ones. If you took your counterfeit one into an Apple shop, they gave you a genuine one. Because they were buying these things that looked, they were counterfeit. We're going to talk about clones and stuff later, but these were just plain counterfeit chargers, and they were melting and starting fires and all the rest of it. So Apple, in a way of pardon the pun, to put the flames out over the whole thing, were replacing them for people who'd been ripped off by that. But it just goes to show that it's not an e-cig problem, it's a lithium-ion battery problem. So it would have been nicer if they'd reflected that, I suppose. Now, I'm going to take my first ad break. It lasts a couple of minutes. And when we get back, I think I shall look at this thing. There it is, the Atlantis. sub-ohm tanky doobry thing. There you go, that's what I was trying to do, is put that up, this thing. I think you're going to like this. I think you're going to like it. We'll find out very shortly. See you in a minute.
Joytech UK are proud sponsors of vapetrails.tv.
Often imitated, never duplicated. Award-winning service and products from cloud9vaping.co.uk.
Vapers, do you love discovering new e-liquids? Tell Dripper the types of flavours you like and they'll send you 5 gourmet juices each month. Experience new and exclusive flavours, all with a money-back guarantee and free delivery anywhere in Europe. Dripper.co.uk.
RY4 Radio.
And we're back in the room. Welcome back. Right. Okay, now let's have a look at this thing. This is the Atlantis from Aspire. Okay. And it caused a bit of a buzz when pictures of it started appearing a few weeks ago, I guess. And I managed to get my hands on one, as you can see. I actually bought it from a website called vaporsjuice.com. I ordered it. I paid 25 quid for it and a few quid for postage. I think it cost me £28.20. And I ordered it from a Swiss train on Thursday afternoon and it arrived on Friday morning. So no complaints from me about service and what have you. It is appears to be, it's got the little Aspire scratch and check thing that I always totally ignore on the back, and little hologram and everything, so I believe it's the genuine article. You can see, even on that camera shot probably, that there is some liquid in this tank, and that is because I have been playing with it. It caused a little bit of controversy, this tank, when it came out, because it is designed and indeed comes with sub-ohm coils. So I've not actually got an Aspire Nautilus myself, but I'm led to believe that these coils, and we'll have a look at one on the close-up camera in a minute, but I'm led to believe that they're about the same size as that, but they're a little bit chunky. I'll show you what I mean. Obviously I've got the tank full of juice, so but they give you, it came with one head in the tank and a spare one and a spare glass, and I'll show you all of that stuff. I'll get the other camera up. Here we go. I'll have to slide my chair across slightly because then I can reach properly. And if I get the glare off it, that's the tank in its little box. You can see it says Aspire. It's got the little recycling triangle and all this stuff that looks like recyclable paper inside, and then they put it in a hard plastic case, so make what you will of that. Inside, it arrived just like that, but obviously with no juice in it. That is the tank. We'll just put that there for a second. We'll shove it in that thing so it doesn't roll too far away. It's got a little paper insert. There's a little sticker to say like them on Facebook. There's inside you get this thing, and as I say, there's a spare Pyrex tank, which is just the same as the one that's on there, just in case you bust it. And that, let's face it, is a possibility. And then you've got these atomizer heads, and as I say, this one hasn't actually been taken out yet, but I just want to show you this because I'm used to the Aspire BDC and more recently the BVC coils, you know, that I've been using in this silo tank, and with the K1 thing over there and the BDC cartomizers. But this thing is quite... In fact, I've got one to hand. Let's do a comparison. That's your BDC, BVC size coil, and I really don't know which this is. It probably says on it. I think that's a BDC coil. And this is the thing that goes in the Atlantis tank. And I must admit, when I looked at it first, I looked inside and you can see the coil is actually, you can see the wire from the coil there. You can just about make it out on that picture, I think. And I wondered if something was missing. You can see the wire mesh on the top there. And I wondered if it was bust. But by looking at the spare one that came with it, I decided it wasn't. I mean, look at it. It's just ginormous compared to that thing. And I have to say, it does seem to work rather well. It registers at 0.5 ohms. Let's try and get the tank without pouring juice anywhere now. I suppose the first things that to look at is this like exhaust pipe that's on the top. It's like a baked bean can. That is the fattest drip tip I have ever seen in my life. And look at it. Bleeding massive. Yeah. And I'm not sure if that's the same size as another 510. We could test that, couldn't we? We could test it. If I just throw a drip tip onto the floor. Here we go. Here's a drip tip. Yeah, it is, look. So you can use your own drip tip if you want. But of course, it's designed for this big fat thing because it's designed for cloud chasing. So I'll leave that in there. So it's full of juice, so I'm going to do this carefully. There's like a plastic seal just inside this end of the perspex. You may have noticed when I unpacked this thing, there were no instructions at all. There is mention of a website to visit to find out how to use it. It says to learn more about your products and how to use, please visit www.aspirecig.com. Interestingly, it says designed in California, assembled by iGate in China, and wire made in the USA. Don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Really doesn't make any odds to me, if I'm honest. But there's no instructions on how this thing fits together. So if you bought this and hadn't used something like one of the other Aspire things, I've got a mini David as well. So I'm kind of familiar with the way they fit together. Otherwise, I would have had to look it up. But you turn that thing, and because of that plastic washer, you start to doubt yourself the first couple of times about whether it's actually coming loose or not. But it is. You can see there's a thread there, which is, it's threaded actually on the end of the coil enclosure, the actual head. The coil, I don't want to get too covered in juice, but that just screws into this base, and you can see that you've got this sort of plastic fitting to stop leaking and what have you there. And if you look at the mechanism inside, it too is truly ginormous. And this bit, the thread goes into that bit. So when you fill it, and I suppose we can, can't we? We could give it a little top up. Because this is a cloud chasing atomizer, I went looking to see if I got any VG juice, and I got some RY High 5. That happens to be VG. So you top that up, and you'll see where you top it up to, unless you're a total div, because you see that little sort of what would you call those? Little ramparts, aren't they? If you go over the lowest part of that with the juice, it's going to go down the middle and through that exhaust pipe baked bean can drip it. So put that on, screw it in, and again, because of the plastic threading, you're not sure if you're getting traction on this, but if you keep going long enough, you know, you'll start to get some resistance, and you'll know it's tightened. And obviously it's a glass tank, so don't over tighten it. I think once that seal is all in and what have you, I don't think you've got any worries about leaks or stuff like that. I certainly haven't had any in there. I've been using it since Friday morning. While we've got the thing up in front of the camera like that, I will show you that you can turn this thing here for different air hole sizes, ranging from quite small to just small to medium to massive. Because again, or so they tell me, for cloud chasing you need plenty of airflow. So basically, if you're after a nice sort of flavoursome, what should I say, peaceful draw with a little bit of resistance or something like that to the draw, then this ain't it. Okay, because this thing, basically you can just breathe in. You don't need to drag this thing. And it works fine. Now, one of the reasons these things were controversial, one of the reasons these things were a bit controversial when they were first announced, and I think a few of the UK vendors used the forums just to test the water and see what response they were getting. There were obviously going to be a bunch of people who were into sort of sub-ohm vaping, and who were going to go, yes, want. And then there were people like me who will try anything because it's fun. But a lot of people out there vaping, we've discussed on a number of times on VTTV, not that sub-ohming is dangerous, because that would be a stupid thing to say. Sub-ohming is not dangerous provided you do things right, provided you use a battery that can basically take the load that the coil that you're going to put on it is going to require. There were a few concerns about whether a tank like this, you know, this is coming with a 0.5 ohm coil in it, won't work on the iStick, right? It's too low. That the protection on the iStick will cut out long before you could use this. There's a lot of debate about whether really a mass-produced something like this, which is, let's face it, this is an extreme sort of hobbyist thing. I believe so anyway. It's just my opinion. Whether it makes sense to put those in, mass-produce them, and put them on websites where newbies might come along, stick them on an ego, overload the battery, and end up in strife. Obviously, most egos, if they're decent quality ones, will be regulated and will just refuse to fire, like the iStick would. And I haven't tried that, but I have confidence. I'm going to stick it on the iStick here and switch that camera, and that iStick might need turning on. And there you go, straight away it tells me atomizer low. You know, it ain't going to let me do it. It ain't going to let me stress that battery. But what if, he says, with a little sort of, almost a little segue into the clone piece, you picked up some £5 ego battery from somewhere that wasn't properly regulated and shoved that on it. Or more likely, you take a mechanical mod with no electronics in it at all, and a cheap battery, and put that in there that isn't rated properly, and try to use it, then we could end up with some trouble. And, I guess time will show us whether, people do get into grief with this. I really hope that that anybody that's selling these provide the necessary advice, because there ain't no warning on the packaging that came from it. I know where I have seen them advertised on the internet that certainly where I got mine from Vapor's Juice, they've given an important safety notice, and it says the Aspire Atlantis sub-ohm tank is designed for high-powered batteries and as such cannot be used with typical Ego-style batteries. You need a battery capable of producing more power than traditional Ego devices, and it goes on to give more information about it, and that's in big red font as well. So, I think that's fair enough. I just hope everybody else does it, because we don't want anybody getting into strife and let's be honest, producing bad publicity about these things. But anyway, enough of the off the soapbox for a minute, eh? I don't have that many devices that can really make this thing work properly, but what I do have is this ecig Supreme, which we looked at, I don't know, a couple of months back now, I guess, wasn't it? We can put that on there. Now, I was tweeting pictures of me blowing vapour out of this on Twitter, funnily enough, on Friday, and it seems that you're supposed to use much lower concentration nicotine than you used to, because apparently it's a bit nasty, but I don't believe in that stuff. It's I don't really do low concentration, so you might see me choke a bit now. As you can see, I've got this on 22 watts at the moment, which is about as much as I can stand, I've learned over the last couple of days with this strength of everything. I'm not sure if you can make out the really small print there, but it is 0.5 ohms exactly. It says 25 degrees centigrade currently. 22 watts and therefore 3.3 volts. Now, I did all my research. Somebody on Twitter said, you've got to long inhale this. Okay, I'm just looking to see if anybody's watching this with anticipation in chat. So you've got to long inhale this to get any vapour out. Now, this camera is notoriously bad for showing the amount of vapour, but I'm going to give it a shot, right? So I'm just going to... What I found is when I press the button on the EV, you have to wait like a split second for the coil to actually start sizzling. I guess that's something to do with the electronics. So I'm going to do that. And let's see what happens, eh? Yeah, trust me that in the room here there's plenty of vapour there, and that is a little bit rough on the old thread, because I've been like using this thing at 14 watts or something, and this thing is a little bit beast. But I found the first couple of drags you do have to sort of a bit, just have a little drink, So let's have another go now. I did it at 30 watts earlier, and that was too much. This is 24 milligram. Yes, 24. So, VG. But there's some BM1 in there as well, so it's kind of a mixture of both. Let's have another go. As you can see, even this camera is picking up the fact that it's actually making quite a nice cloud, isn't it? So I would have to say that it does what it says on the tin, or what people have said it'll do on forums, because it doesn't say much on the tin at all, is the truth. If you're after like a kind of cloud chasing kind of setup, if that floats your boat, and with the convenience of a tank, it does seem to do it, doesn't it? Let's have another go. I'll try and turn sideways a bit and see if it works. Which way do I want to blow vapour? That way. I just saw Disco Des say that's not lung inhale. I can promise you it is. I can promise you it is. Right, now, the tank works. The tank does exactly what it says. The flavour is good enough. It's okay. I'm using a juice that I don't normally use all the time because of the VG content, because if you're buying a cloud chasing tank, you might as well make some clouds, mightn't you? But I have to say, the flavour is much better, I'm finding, on something like this than it is on that. So people say the more vapor, the more you get the flavour, and I'm just not finding that at all. That perception of flavour you get when on the exhale, when you use something higher ohmage. What I'm saying is I prefer this. I find it much more satisfying. Yes, it's good fun. Yeah, if I went to a vape meet or something, this would be quite good fun to blow vapour and look like a steam train and what have you. But for me, I prefer this silo tank that we looked at last week. It's more practical. I don't have, because if you knock this right down, the wattage right down, then you may as well not bother, because it's so airy. You see, but it works. Like I say, the combination of camera and light don't really pick up the vapour that well the way I've got things set up here. Like you can barely see the vapour from this, but trust me, in the room here, there's plenty of fog. Anyway, so hopefully, if you're thinking of getting one of those, that tells you a bit more about it. I think I've covered everything. There is apparently, I've just seen a comment in chat there is an Aspire battery that comes with it. I think they call it the sub-ohm or something, don't they? And that's fine. But I have to say, 30 watts, like inhaling into my lungs with that, I just found really uncomfortable, to be honest with you. I didn't like it much at all. So 22 is about where I settled. It's okay, as you can see, so I'm still breathing. But it does, let's sum it all up. It does what it's supposed to do. I'm just not convinced it's for me. It's time to take another break now. When we come back, we're going to have a little chat about clones. See you in a minute.
LP Vape, UK purveyor of e-cigarettes and e-liquids. Proud sponsors of Vaping Entertainment on Vapor Trails TV.
And welcome back. Right then, so clones. Now, like I say, we've already had one tweet on the subject. I'll put it up. It says, it's from GavDip, and it says, my views on clones, as long as they are bought and they are sold as such, and of good quality, I don't mind, as on a strict budget. Okay, so that's GavDip's opinion. What I'm going to do is I'm first of all going to play in the VT from Dave Dawn, and then that was just a test. That was just a test. I'm now going to play in the video from Dave Dawn on the subject of clones, and then when he gets back, I'm going to add my 2 penneth. So see you in a couple of minutes.
Clones create so much controversy, don't they? Clones. Somebody saying, I've got a Nemi clone, I've got a Ego clone, I've got a this clone, I've got a that clone, I've got the other clone. I'm not going to pay 120 quid for something that I can get for a tenner from the Chinese website that shall not be named. Clones. A few people probably know I was, for an awful long time, a musician. I would point you, therefore, at Fender Stratocasters and Fender Telecasters, Gibson SGs, and various other guitars that have, at one point or another in their lifespans, become almost legendary. Within 2 years of Leo Fender's Stratocaster being launched, there were copies of it on the market. And Fender, being Fender and being rightly very protective of their intellectual property, they sought to take people to court, companies that were producing copies or clones of the original Fender Stratocaster. But a few years later, these copiers, the cloners, who were really paying tribute to the powerhouse that was the Strat, cottoned on to the fact that if they changed the design a little and didn't call it a Stratocaster, simply let the shape do the calling for them, they realised that there wasn't a problem. And at some point during the course of Fender's existence, they realised that a low quality Stratocaster copy sold Stratocasters. The reason being, generally speaking, the audio quality, the sound quality out of the clone was utter crud, but the general feel, the shape, the feel around the neck, the feel in the rib cage, the feel of the hand on the whammy bar, that kind of thing, was something that the player wanted. They also realised that if you went and bought a 55 or 60 pound Fender Stratocaster copy, you would be much more likely, when the funds permitted, to buy the real I Am Fender. And in some cases, the copies were so good that Fender went and bought out the companies that were doing them and kept the copies on the market, but rebadged them. And this is a point. What is now Fender Japan was a copier, a creator of copied Stratocasters, but they didn't call it a Stratocaster. I don't know what they called it, but it wasn't a Stratocaster. And they didn't have Stratocaster copy, they didn't have Stratocaster clone. They called it whatever it was they called it. I don't know, let's say it was a Dubry What's It. So you would go and buy this Japanese Doobly Watson that looked very, very similar to a Fender Stratocaster, felt very, very similar, but it wasn't sold on the Stratocaster name. And this is something that really pisses me off about the Chinese copyists, and they're not alone. The whole notion of creating a copy of a successful atomizer or battery tube or whatever it happens to be, it's not unusual. It happens in every industry. There are car manufacturers that will take the best bits from their competition and build them into their own. There are guitar makers, drum makers, there's all kinds. Skis, violins, you name it. Every kind of industry that you can think of, they take the best bits and then produce a device that's as close to it as they can legally get without being taken to court and getting cease and desist orders. But they never call them the same name as the original. And that, I'm afraid, is something, as I said, that really gets to me about e-cigs. You will see things like, this is a Nemesis clone. It's not a Nemesis. It shouldn't be called a Nemesis. The word Nemesis shouldn't be in there. Call it something else, but don't call it a Nemesis. Because there are people out there who might well believe they are buying the original, and they need to know that they're not. So don't call it a Nemesis. And the same applies with the Scrape clones. Don't call it a Scrape. Call it something else, but don't call it a Scrape. So this, if you like, is a bit of a plea to all of the Chinese. Yes, I know you're short-circuiting everything. Yes, I know you are making what should be high-end product available at low-end prices. Sometimes at the same level of quality, sometimes utter rubbish quality, and in some cases better quality. But whatever, don't call it the same name as the original. It's misleading. And if you're a vendor, you know, we were talking last time about OEMing things. This is where you do need to OEM. If you're going to get these clones in and you're going to sell them, call them something bloody different. Get a different box with a different name on. And make sure that none of these clones, none of these copies have the original identifying marks and logos on them. They should not have that. They really shouldn't. Because at some point, somebody somewhere on the classifieds on the forum is going to try and flog a clone as an original, and some poor sucker's going to get caught out. Because not everybody that uses an e-cig is as honest as you and me. There are some nasty buggers out there. The nasty buggers that have nicked mods from various different events that have been on. So yeah, vendors, the OEM stuff we were talking about last time, OEM clones so that they've got a different name and don't have the laser engraved markings that the originals have on. I hate that with a vengeance. You'll never stop cloning, but let's not make it easy, eh? Thank you very much.
And welcome back. Right, okay, so yes, I was watching some of the comments. We had a few tweets there, as you saw, and I saw also that there's been discussion in chat about clones, and this is a contentious subject, and I fully understand both sides of the argument. I actually largely agree with Dave, and I said right at the beginning of the show that we could almost have colluded on that video, but I promise we didn't. Let's give you a shot here, right? On the left here, that's a Gibson. It says Gibson on the top, and it really is a Gibson, right? And it's not the best Gibson guitar in the world, but it's what I aspired to throughout my youth. This is a Fender, which is a toy. This is a real guitar. The reason I show you that is that Gibson Les Paul sitting on the wall there, right? I was in my 30s before I could afford one of those. So when I used to play in bands and stuff, when I was learning to play as a teenager and what have you, I had probably half a dozen guitars that looked just like that, the shape. But they were a million miles away from that one. Okay, they were, and I think like a lot of the e-cigs that we see that are cloned today and things that are sold as clones, they are completely inferior affordable copies. But at no point did I ever lose my aspiration to own a Gibson. You know, the day that I had the money to go and buy myself a real Gibson, I did. And it's a second-hand one. And I think I bought it in France, but I paid the equivalent of about 600 quid for it, which was a good deal. But, you know, I think the Gibson clone that I bought before it, and it wasn't even an Epiphone, which is Gibson's budget brand, like Dave referred to in the video there. It was something that was a similar shape with a different... I can't even remember what the brand name was on it, to be honest with you. I think that cost me about 50 quid, though, to give you an idea. So I think that's very true. When it comes to e-cigs, however, okay, I must admit to having sort of mixed feelings on this whole clone business, right? When somebody brings out a mass-produced cheap mod from a factory in China and then somebody else copies it, a bit like the Ego, I think that's a bit irritating, okay? But I don't get sort of upset about it. When, however, and I should put my cards on the table here, really, shouldn't I? A lot of people will know that I'm a part owner of the UK Vapers Forum, and we have some very strict rules on how people discuss and certainly how they promote the sale of clones on the forum. And we get a lot of stick for it. And one of the joys of being a non-commercial organisation, if you like, at a forum that is not dependent on advertising money or anything like that, is we don't have to care. We can say what we want. And I know, and I mean I genuinely know, sometimes I've only met these people in Skype chats or online, and sometimes I've met them at vape meets and all the rest of it, but I know a lot of mod makers from several years ago who put a lot of time and effort into designing mods, coming up with new ideas. I'm not going to name any names, but coming up with really innovative ideas that we hadn't seen for the first time. And you know, they put a few photographs up on one of the forums to sell them. You know, at a cost that they believe is fair. You may agree, you may not. Who cares? But the point is that they put these things up for sale, and within a couple of weeks, you can get them for a quarter of the price from some Chinese websites. And so I've got to be honest, when I'm looking at the subject of clones, I think about the person whose idea got stolen and whose idea got cloned, and that's kind of the way I look at it. Personally, you know, and that's kind of a loyalty to some people who I think were sort of they were the trailblazers and people who broke the ground for a lot of the stuff we take for granted today. And it does occur to me that there's a lot of sort of companies in China at the moment who don't bother with innovation anymore. They're just nicking other people's ideas and making those ideas therefore unsustainable for the small mod makers, and the innovation dries up. Now, there is an argument to say that you can't get your hands on a lot of these small run order European and American made mods anyway, so it's obviously not doing them too much harm, and that may very well be true, but my personal loyalties lie to the man in the shed, because I know a few of them, and you know, I have a little bit of respect for what they've done. Now, that said, I have to acknowledge that if you have to wait on a waiting list for 2 years to spend 200 quid on something, then you know, the clones, they represent a viable option. You know, it's feasible. You can actually get your hands on one. I just really hope that, much like me and my Gibson guitar, the people who buy those, the aspiration is to one day to get hold of the real thing and actually reward the people who came up with the innovation and the ideas and actually put it into reality. But then again, maybe I'm just a hopeless romantic. I don't know. But so that's my piece on that. That's my piece. And that brings us very neatly to the end of the show. Can I say thank you very much for joining in tonight with all your chat comments, which I do my best to monitor, but it can be a bit tricky. But I've done my best to pull them out every now and then. And thanks very much for the tweets. We know that works. Within the next week or two, we'll be having a competition that's worth having on this show on Dave's Tackle Box. And tonight's little Twitter feed thing was a bit of a test of how we're going to run that. So maybe next week, it may be the week after, but we're going to have a competition with a prize that's worth winning. I promise you. But until then, I'd just like to say that's a lot until next week. Until then, thanks for watching and good night.